Let's talk about the prophecy of Neferti. I hope that you are doing well and God bless you. And I want to kind of come to you today and talk about the prophecy of Neferti. I want to talk about this prophecy and this very famous and ancient piece of Kemetic literature. It discusses a prophecy by a man who was summoned before King Sneferu and is asked to tell things that will come in the future, what will happen, maybe what has come to pass and what will come to pass in the future. So as we talk about this becomes a way to kind of look at and take a kind of a view into the Kemetic way of thinking, especially in the Middle Kingdom. So this is something that was written in the Middle Kingdom sometime around the start of the 12th dynasty. It refers to the start of the 12th dynasty. It was probably written after that, but it refers to the start of the 12th dynasty in the Middle Kingdom, which probably know was started with the 11th dynasty. So it's talking about the rise of the 12th dynasty, if you will, but there's a lot of information with respect to it. So we'll kind of get into it and kind of talk about the background around it and what did it actually say and what does it mean for us today? How can we take some information from it and kind of learn about it from today? So let's jump into it. Let's talk about it. It's set in the time of King Sneferu. It's set in the time of the 3rd dynasty. So although it's talking about a king from the 12th dynasty, it's set in the time of King Sneferu, who was in the Old Kingdom. And he is, of course, the builder of the great bent pyramids and a very famous person in ancient Kemetic theology and thought and that type of thing. So he is 3rd or 4th dynasty, and he is there, King Sneferu, in the 3rd dynasty, and he is there in his court and in his kingdom, and he is talking to his magistrates and he's talking to the people who come to see him every day. And the king is someone in ancient Kemetic times. When the king rose, there was a whole ceremony when the king got up, a whole ceremony of people who helped clothe the king, and ceremonies that the king would do in front of deities and in front of priests, with priests there and by himself before even starting the day. And when the king would finally get into his hall and his audience hall, he would have the magistrates come before him to ask questions or to give reports about things that were happening in the kingdom, in the business of the kingdom. And in this particular day, the magistrate came before him and they left, and he called the magistrates back. He called for all his magistrates, all of his officials that were in the area to come back and sit before him. So King Sneferu says, bring all the people here, bring all of my officials here and bring them before me. And they come back to the king and they go, king, what is it you want? And they're bowing down. He said, I want you to find a man, find a person, somebody in our area, somebody in this area who can speak to me good words, who can speak to me words of wisdom, speak to me words that will inspire me, that will tell me of things to come and tell me things that will inspire me. Find me someone who will come speak good words before the king to please my heart. And the magistrates, the officials were kind of sitting around. They were kind of thinking, what are we doing? They said, there's a man and his name is Neferti. He's a priest of Bastet, and he is from the east. He is someone who's not far. We can get him and bring him, but we think he is somebody who will be a good person, just the right person to bring before you, king. So Sneferu says, bring him and bring him before me. So they run, they get him as quickly as they can, and they bring back Neferti in front of King Sneferu. And of course, Neferti's kind of bowed down, and he is paying deference to the king. And he said, what can I do for you, king? And he said, I want you to give me words. Give me words of wisdom. They say that you can speak words of wisdom, words of inspiration. Give me the words that you have to say. And Neferti says, okay, king. He says, do you want me to tell you about things that have happened in the past or what will happen? And the king says, the things that have already happened in the past have happened. I want you to tell me about what will happen. Give me your words. And so they begin to take a scroll, a piece of papyrus, and they take a palette, and they begin to write all the words that came out of Neferti's mouth. And he was about to tell them things about the coming. He said, I will speak to you, and the things that I speak to you, I don't speak about things that don't come to pass. I talk about things that will actually happen. So Neferti is talking. He says, when you think about it, I'm going to tell you what will happen in the future, but I need to tell you what's happening now. What's going on in our kingdom and what's going to take place is going to be a bad thing that takes place in the land of Kemet. You will find that the Asiatic, and he refers to Asiatic people who were living in the sand to the east of them, people who were to the east of Kemet. So imagine Kemet and those to the east. He said, they have come into our land and they've come over and they've taken over parts of our country. They've taken over parts of our land to the point where they don't fear anybody that's here. They are roaming our areas, and they're essentially letting their cattle and their animals drink from the waters of Kemet. And you will find that the people here have begun to lose their way. They've lost their way from God. They've stopped kind of calling on God to find their guidance. There's evil in the land. Evil will arise in the land of Kemet. Foreigners will take over and they will be in control, and people will start to lose their way from God. They will start to ask about, what if I had this and what can I do this? They'll start to ask for things that God could have given them in the first place. They will start to lose their ability to see, and they will lose their ability to hear. And when you don't hear from God, when you don't see the things that God is showing you, you will be led by anybody. You will be led astray and you'll be easily falling and taken away. And he starts to mention how the people begin to kind of let hate rule. They begin to not only not be able to see and not be able to hear, they begin to fight one another. They begin to take up arms. They begin to do a number of different things. And they start to say, it becomes a period of time where people start to be silent in the face of evil. People started, he says, beware of a time, and we can think about this even today, beware of a situation where you are silent, where you refuse to cry out when you are facing evil. When evil is in the land, when things are bad happening and nobody is speaking up against it, when people are afraid to speak up against evil, that is a time to cry for your country. That is a time to cry for your community. When something that should be rebuked is feared. Now, I think about it. I think about people who, and all the things that, Diddy's accused of doing, and people who are famous, who are there, what they are accused of doing, what they're allegedly done, and all the things that people have said that happened to them in terms of abuse, and how many people stood by and saw those things happen and were afraid to speak up. When you see evil taking place, you just let it happen. He's saying, Neferti says to them, beware and be afraid of a time when people see something that should be rebuked and they're afraid to speak up. When they see evil and when it should be stood up against and challenged, it's feared. And evil then is allowed to progress. Evil then is allowed to continue landing. You think about this in your own life and in our own lives. How are we in situations where people begin to see bad things happening and don't say anything about it? People just kind of let it go. I remember, and I'll share this as we kind of go. I remember seeing a woman who was really being attacked. She was being attacked by this man. He was literally pulling out of the car and beating her. And I was in the car with my father and my family and my mom. And my father hurried up and took us home. And like the man he is, he went out. He went out and he went back to the place where the man was, and it called the police and tried to help. And I think the man was trying to leave when my dad got there, but he got us home and then went back to the area. And I think about how many people saw maybe this woman crying out for help, and very few people did anything. He was a man who spoke up. And what Neferti was prophesying in front of Neferti this time, he's saying, be afraid. When you start to be in a community and people are afraid, don't speak up when bad things happen. They allow these things to happen in their lives. And Neferti begins to continue to tell Sneferu, he tells them, the other thing that's happening is people don't even care for the land. When you look around you, nobody's even seeing what's happening to the earth. He's saying our crops are not being grown. Our water's not being taken care of. Our animals are not being taken care of. The fruits and the products and the produce that would come from our land is not coming, and nobody is crying about it. Nobody is upset. Look around you and see the deterioration in our food. See the deterioration of our land. See that Happy is not satisfied, that the Nile is not being cared for and not being satisfied. Nobody is even concerned about that. He said it's going to be a situation where people begin to see and they begin to take up arms and they start to fight one another, and people will turn their backs as other people are killed behind them and not even pay attention to the man who's being murdered or fights that are happening. Brothers will fight brothers, and fathers will fight sons, and sons will rise up and destroy and kill fathers. This is what's happening in the land of Kemet. This is what's taking place, and we must be aware of that. And part of that is because we've allowed evil to set in. We've allowed these things to set in our life, and we haven't done enough about them. And he begins to talk about, the whole existence of there being Asiatic people. He mentions specific Asiatic people that are there, and they start to allow other people and other sets of values, if you will, take over, because people have lost their way, that by default, by not doing what God has, by not allowing God to lead you, by default, you're going to let evil in. And sometimes that's a time in our life, a spirit in our life, and a time in our life where we may say, how is it that I follow God's will? And we may think, it doesn't matter. I don't necessarily have to do that. I know I have a calling in my life, or I know I'm supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And you think it's not a big deal. I really don't have to do these things. These things are not important. But when you start to not do and not allow God to fill up your life, to fill up your heart, to fill up your mind, you're going to let something else in. It's like your mind is a cup. Your body is a cup. Your spirit is a cup. It's going to be filled with something. And if you don't fill it up with good water and good things, something else is going to take that place, because it's meant to be a receptacle. It's meant to be something that receives something and receives that power that will move you forward. And Neferti is prophesying. He's prophesying in front of King Sneferu, saying all these things are coming to pass. All of these bad things are coming to pass for Kemet. But a man will rise in the land. A king will rise from the south. He will be a man from Taseti. He will be a son of a mother from Taseti. He will be a child of Upper Kemet. He will come and he will bring bring order to the land. He will push out the Asiatics. He will defeat the Libyan people. He will bring order to the land. He will build a wall that will be impenetrable. He will bring order to the land, and he will bring God back in his place. He will bring order back in his place. He said, and remember that I told you this. And this man who will come will be Amenemhat the first. This will be the man who will come. And he talks about Amenemhat as being that one who will be the king, who will be a son of the south, a son of a woman from Taseti, a child of upper Kemet, and that he would bring back order, and he would drive out the foreigners, drive out the Asiatics, and bring back order. And remember, when I told you this, remember when these things come to pass, those of you who are wise will pour libations and offerings to me when you see that the things that I've told you have actually come to pass. That's what Neferti says. And that's kind of what the prophecy of Neferti says. It's literally something that talks about a setting of being in front of King Sneferu when the Neferti priest is brought in, and he foreshadows things to come, of there being a bad time for ancient Kemet, of people coming from the east and basically disrupting the whole era and the whole order that their evil sets in the land, hate sets into people's hearts. And Amenemhat I, who will be the first king of the 12th dynasty, will rise, and he will come and set things in order. And when you think about that, I kind of want to stop and talk a little bit about that, and kind of to move that a bit. God bless you. Hope that you're doing well. I want to touch on that a little bit, because as he's talking about that, and he's kind of mentioning that, it touches on a couple things that with respect to that. And one of the things that jumps out at me is that the people that they mention here, they mention a lot of times people from Asiatic areas, people from sand dwellers, from the east of ancient Kemet, that came in and helped to disrupt the land and helped to be people that needed to be fought. And so many times you would hear people say that it was the Nubians who were treated in such a way. It was the Nubians that the Kemetic people. There's no mention of Nubia in a bad way in this prophecy. There's no mention that these are people that we need to defend. They're talking about being under attack, if you will, by people from the east of them, and those people coming in to invade their land. So it becomes a significant thing as I stop and think about it, because it sets us up in a time. You will find later on in the 12th dynasty, descendants of Amenemhat, they will eventually go set up fortresses on the southern border and into Nubia, going down to the second cataract. They will begin to set up fortresses with respect to the people that are in Kush, and see Kush as a threat that has already emerged as a threat, already emerged as a powerhouse in that area. But this area, and this son of Taseti, if we will, Amenemhat the first, is somebody who's sought to bring back prosperity, in particular in the north of the land, and sought to bring back prosperity against the people who were fighting from the east. And it's interesting because it's also mentioned that he's a son of Taseti. Now, some people will say that's referring to some type of gnome that's in ancient Kemet. However they want to say it, it's clearly referring to people who are coming from the south of Kemet, and Taseti being a reference to the land of the bow. He's talking about people who were closely associated with Nubian people who were there in the southern part of Kemet, and he would be a child of the southern part of Kemet. He would be a child of Upper Kemet. So it gives you an example and an understanding that not only were there people, but all of Kemet's history, obviously, who were Nubian people, black people, and of all kinds of diversity, if you will, and ethnicities. These people are just never talked about. We're told that we're not told about this particular prophecy of Neferti. We're not told about the 12th dynasty look at themselves as being sons of Taseti, as coming from the south, of being in conjunction with and in love with and of heritage with the people who are from Nubia, people who may be of a different society, but of kinship when it comes to heritage. We're not talked about and told about the 11th dynasty and Amenemhat, and obviously what he did and what he looked like, and his family and people he took on as Nubian wives. We're not talking about the Nubian soldiers. So many things that are there with ancient Kemet, that you find that it is a rich culture that has so many other societies that is interacting with Nubians, as well as people that they shared heritage with, and things that they're doing with people who are from the east and from the north, from the west of them. All of these societies are coming together, and it's really funny how we don't really talk about those that emerged in terms of what they talked about, what they actually said, what they looked like, and what they did in terms of King Amenemhat I. So I just wanted to share that. It's a very interesting prophecy that I'll be sharing with some people who are on my channel with members. But I think it's a very interesting prophecy that kind of comes forth. And, kind of put your comments down below if you have additional things that you want to say about this whole study. But it is something that you could look at. It is a remarkable piece of literature where it talks about a prophet, coming before Sneferu, prophesying things about ancient Kemet, mentioning that the man who will come to save them, the son of man who will come to save them, will be the son of a woman from Taseti, and he will be a child of Upper Kemet. So I wanted to share that with you. It's a very good thing to kind of research your own and look at, and to know that Amenemhat and a lot of people who came after him were people who rose up and had a kinship and an understanding of Nubia and other places in their lives, and that this is a very important piece of literature, beyond that. It really speaks to what happens when you lose your way. When we lose our way and we don't allow God to be at the center of our lives. What happens when we allow evil to be either present in our lives and don't say anything about it? I think about us being in a situation where you may even be sitting in a movie or hearing entertainment, and something is inappropriate that says something that's nasty, something that's evil, something that's inappropriate. You're calling women names, or something happens that you may see that's entertainment, whether it's music or something we see in Hollywood, and we do nothing about it. Imagine sitting yourself, not let alone with your children, sitting yourself and hearing these things come into your mind and not saying anything, not stopping it, not saying, wait, that's wrong. I shouldn't even celebrate that in song. I shouldn't even celebrate like that's not important. That person just said something that I would never do. Something that should never be done. They just celebrated it. And I feel as if I didn't stop it for myself. The prophecy is really speaking to you and speaking to you specifically and saying that even if you allow personally things to creep into your life that are not of God, that are not centering you, you're going to find that they're going to have an effect. It's like a weed growing. If you let that grow in your garden, if you let that thing creep into your life, it's going to take root. And you're going to find pretty soon that your life is going to be filled up. Your land is going to be filled with things you don't want to have happen, things you do not want to grow. You're not going to even be seeing and understanding and taking care of your spirit, the very thing that's bringing forth things in your life. You're not taking care of the earth wheel, your foundation, because you're allowing things that are evil to kind of come into your life, and you replace that with the things that should have been there, the good things that should have been there. You've placed the good things with evil things, and there's a consequence for that. There is a consequence that pretty soon you'll start to see even the ability to be able to say stop from yourself, the ability to stop things from coming into your mind, stop things from coming into your whole sphere of influence, your whole sphere of what you're taking in. You have that ability. You have the ability to stop the things that you see. If they're not filling you up, stop the thing. Whatever you're seeing, whatever you're listening to, whatever you're meditating on, whether you see that in TV or music or social media, whatever you're allowing to come into your spirit, what you're reading, if that's not making you grow, if that's giving you something that's opposite of God's plan in your life, think about this prophecy of Neferti. Think about this prophecy, because he's saying this about the land of Kemet, and he's supposedly saying this in front of Neferti. He's supposedly saying that one of the greater kings, if you will, in Kemetic history, because they really looked up to him, and saying it to a country that had great glory, that had mighty things, that had, really one of these significant countries in all of human history, right? It is, right? And he's saying the mighty, as great as you can be, you can fall. The mighty can fall too. You can be in a situation where you're as comfortable as you want to be. You have as much money as you want, or you're living in the house that you want. You're married to the person, whatever it is, whatever you define as success, you can have those things happen, and it could still be taken away from you if you're not careful. You could still crash, because the very thing that makes you grow is your spirit. The very thing that connects you is your connection with God. And if you allow something else, something that is evil, that's not supposed to hold that position in your life, that place in your life, if you allow that to come into your life and seep in, it's going to have effects. It's going to have consequences. So I just want to say that today about the prophecy of Neferti. If you get a chance, take a look at it yourself, kind of read up on it. I thank you so much for paying attention. If you get a chance, leave some comments down below, and God bless you. I'll talk to you very, very soon.